Here's how the plastic industry thinks we can solve the waste crisis. A deep dive into the petrochemical industry's proposals for the Global Plastics Treaty. This is from the gist. Now, in the time it takes you to read this, say 4 seconds, the world produces nearly 60 metric tons of plastic, almost entirely out of fossil fuels. It's about 53,000 metric tons an hour, 1.3 million metric tons a day, or 460 million metric tons a year. Those numbers are fueling widespread and growing contamination of Earth's oceans, rivers, and terrestrial environment in plastic trash. In March 2022, the United Nations 193 member states got together in Nairobi, Kenya, and agreed to do something about this. They pledged to negotiate a treaty to end plastic pollution with the goal of delivering a final draft by the year 2025, next year, of course. The most ambitious vision espoused by member states in the negotiating sessions that have taken place so far would require petrochemical companies to stop making so much of the darn stuff by putting a cap on global plastic production. Given the existential threat this would pose to fossil fuel and chemical companies, you might expect them to be vociferously opposed to the treaty, yet they claim to support the agreement. They're even championing it, according to statements from a handful of industry groups. The American Chemistry Council has repeatedly welcomed progress on the treaty negotiations, while an executive from International Council of Chemical Associations told Plastics Today in April that the industry is fully committed to supporting an agreement. So what exactly do plastic producing companies want from the treaty? To answer this question, GRIST sifted through dozens of public statements and policy documents from 5 of the world's largest petrochemical industry trade organizations, as well as 2 product-specific industry groups, and the documents included press releases reacting to treaty negotiation sessions and longer position statements detailing the industry's desired pathway to a world without waste. And much of what these groups have published is vague. Many documents call for targets, for example, without saying what they should be. GRIST reached out to all of the groups for clarification, but only 2 agreed to answer questions about the policies they support. What we found is that although they fall far short of what so-called high-ambition countries and advocacy groups would like to get out of the treaty, industry groups' proposals to bolster recycling and waste collection could cause a significant reduction in mismanaged plastic waste, even in the absence of a cap on plastic production. According to a policy analysis tool developed by researchers in the University of California, the elements of the treaty that industry groups support, cobbled together, could cut global plastic pollution by 43 million metric tons annually by the year 2050. That's a 36% reduction below business as usual estimates. Meanwhile, a realistic production cap could cut annual pollution by 48 million metric tons all by itself, excluding a production cap from the treaty that will make it harder to rein in plastic pollution, said Douglas Macaulay, Associate Professor of Biology, University of California, Santa Barbara. He said it means you really have to ramp up your ambition on what some of the other policies would need to do, he said. And these numbers matter because the plastic industry's influence over the treaty negotiations seems to be growing stronger, and the most recent rounds of talks held in Ottawa, Canada, at the end of April, nearly 200 petrochemical and fossil fuel lobbyists registered to attend. That's 37 more than were registered for the previous session, and more than the number of representatives from European Union member states. At the same time, several delegations promoted solutions on the industry's terms. Malaysia warned about the unintended economic consequences of limiting plastic production, and India said the treaty should focus on pollution while considering plastic's utility to modern society. And given the power of the plastics industry and the tendency of international negotiations to cater to the lowest common denominator, it's possible that the treaty will strongly reflect these industry priorities. How the industry sees the problem? To understand the industry position on the plastics treaty, it's important to understand how plastic makers conceptualize a plastic crisis. While they agree that pollution is a scourge, they don't think the solution is to reduce society's production and use of plastic. After all, plastics come with myriad benefits. They're inexpensive, lightweight, and widely used in important sectors like clean energy and medicine. And their unmatched properties and versatility have allowed for incredible innovations that conserve resources and make more things in life possible. America's Plastic Makers, an arm of the American Chemical Council, says policymakers should ensure that the material stays in our economy and out of our environment. Of course, it has to be out of our environment. They've even found plastic pieces in human semen. Can you imagine? The way to do this, according to the industry groups, is through plastics circularity, a concept that seeks to keep the material in use for as long as possible before it's thrown out. Generally, this means more recycling. But circularity can also refer to scaled-up systems allowing the plastic to be reused, or better infrastructure for waste collection. As plastic makers see it, the plastic treaty functions should be to increase circularity while retaining the social and economic benefits derived from plastic products. Perhaps the biggest problem faced by circularity proponents is plastic's abysmal recycling rate. At present, the world only recycles about 9% of all plastics it produces. So the other 91%, where is that? The rest gets sent to landfills or incinerators or winds up as litter, and what's more, in most cases the material can only be reprocessed once or twice, if at all, before it has to be downcycled into lower quality products like carpeting. Although some experts believe it's impossible to recycle much more plastic due to technological and economic constraints, plastic makers say otherwise. Indeed, plastics circularity hinges on possibility of a better recycling rate. The industry's first solution, recycling targets, and to that end, several industry groups, including World Plastics Council, the self-described global voice of plastic industry, are advocating for mandatory minimum recycling rates as part of the treaty, as well as higher targets for recycled content used in new products. And this could mean that countries, regions, or other jurisdictions would set legally binding quotas for the amount of plastic recycled with their borders and then convert into new items. Plastic makers typically favor targets that are set at the local or national level and that differentiate based on the type of plastic, since some types are harder to recycle than others. Industry groups also want recycling targets to be technologically neutral, meaning they should count plastic processed through controversial chemical recycling techniques. Although these techniques do not yet work at scale, the industry says they will one day be able to break down mixed post-consumer plastic into their constituent polymers using high heat and pressure, and then turn those polymers back into new plastic products. The industry's second solution, infrastructure and design changes. And the third solution, application-based regulations. The impact of plastic industry's favorite policies. While it's clear that self-preservation is at the heart of the petrochemical industry's agenda for their plastic industry treaty, the policies it supports should have a positive impact on plastic pollution, according to the policy analysis tool created by researchers at University of California. And this is on Gizmodo by Joseph Winters from GRIST. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.